have been to one of my presentations before? I recognize you two in the back and you. All right, great. Well, we got a lot of new people, which is really fantastic, so welcome. My name is Dr. Deborah Langhel, and I am a naturopathic doctor. I just realized from one of our participants here that I didn't say what ND means. ND means naturopathic doctor, and that's not the same as, it is a medical doctor, but it's a type of doctor that's not very well known in the state of Tennessee. Let me go on. I have some pictures to show a little bit about it, but naturopathic medicine is more well known on the West Coast, and 26 states and jurisdictions allow naturopathic doctors to be your primary care physician. So this is within our scope of practice in states that we're licensed in. This state of Tennessee, does not allow naturopathic doctors to be licensed primary care physicians. So I am not a licensed primary care physician in this state, but I am a licensed primary care physician in other states. So here in this state, I can only act as a healthcare consultant. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm doing healthcare education. I also have my master's in public health, and I'm a certified health education specialist. So I'm perfectly qualified to talk about health topics, and that's where my passion is. Naturopathic medicine is different than what we call allopathic medicine, which is like an MD, because we have a different basis for how we approach healing, and you're going to see that in a second. But this is the 26 states and jurisdictions that allow us. That's these light colored. Tennessee is right here, and as you'll see, that means advocacy initiatives are ongoing. So we're still trying to get the state to allow us to be legal primary care physicians. But it's ongoing. Okay, so here we are, Tennessee. And this is a disclaimer to let you know I'm not giving anyone any specific medical advice. This is for educational purposes only, your information. You're going to talk to your primary care physician to see if anything that I talk about might be good for you to try. Okay, and that's the name of my healthcare consulting business here in Tennessee, because I decided to stay in Tennessee even though we consider it a pre-licensed state. And I picked Emergent because it follows the naturopathic philosophy, which is, I believe we all have health and we are innately healthy. It's just sometimes it gets covered up, and we need it to emerge, right? We need to uncover it so we can emerge into our natural healthy state. This is our philosophy as naturopathic doctors. We call it our therapeutic order, and that's how I was trained in medical school. So my medical school education is almost identical to an MD, except that I take 1/3, so less pharmacology, because we're not about giving drugs to people. We want to get you off your drugs. So instead, we take all the same sciences, everything's the same, but then we add on a lot of homeopathy, physical medicine, and botanical medicine. So we have a lot more tools in our toolbox on how to get you healthy than just drugs and surgery.
So can you write RX?
I can in states that I'm licensed in. Now,
No, here.
no, I can't, because I am not allowed to practice as a physician in this state. So I can only be a healthcare consultant. And normally, even in states that I am licensed in, I would not be inclined to want to write a prescription, because I'm trying to get you off your drugs, I don't want to manage your pharmaceuticals. Now, there are some naturopathic doctors who, if their specialty is like endocrinology, they are willing to manage your diabetes medication as they try to get you lower your insulin or something like that, but that's not my forte. My forte is chronic degenerative diseases and how to help you heal, regain balance in your system, and find out what caused you to sort of veer off track of your natural innate health. So we start with the bottom. We always start we try to remove obstacles to cure. What's preventing you from healing on your own? Because if someone has, let's say, a heavy metal poisoning, you can give the person all the nutrients they need all day long, and it's not going to heal them until we remove the obstacle, and the obstacle might be mercury poisoning, right? So we want to remove the obstacles to cure, and then build a foundation of health, and then work our way up. But, even right here, suppressed pathology, that could be, surgery and drugs. Here, synthetic symptom control, that's like pharmacology, because I took my board exams just like other doctors, and some states require a special board exam for naturopaths in pharmacology because we have less education, so I'm also board certified in pharmacology as well. So, but then here, natural symptom control, that would be like botanical medicines. So like if I prescribe a botanical medicine formula. So if you see, notice, botanicals are still considered high force. Meaning, I don't want to start with botanicals. I want to start down here to figure out why we can't get you healthy. So that's a little bit about our philosophy as naturopathic doctors. Okay, so now, today's lecture or presentation is going to be on improving your sleep. If you've been to some of my presentations before, you'll know that I've focused a lot on air quality and some other things, aging gracefully and heart disease. And today's more of a deep dive into one topic that I've talked about quite a bit already, which is how important sleep is. And sleep, heart disease is one of my specialties. I really, it's one of the #1 killers. And so anything that affects your heart, I'm very interested in. Well, it turns out everything, with naturopathic medicine, it's all overlapping. We're a holistic human being. And so, sleep is one factor. If you've been to my last lecture, you know that I also mentioned oral hygiene affects your heart. So those are like the two things for your heart. Well, today we're not going to talk about oral hygiene at all. So that some people might be going, oh, thank goodness, because I go over it every single time. Today we're not going to talk about that. We're only talking about sleep. And we're going to go into depth about why it's important for your health and specifics, some very specifics about sleep. Okay, so let's keep going. And so, how many of you know that our sleep cycle, it has cycles at night? Yeah, excellent, great. So some of you are familiar with this type of graph right here that illustrates what happens when we sleep. So here's like hour 1, and basically we have about 5 to 6 cycles every night. That's how our brain goes through this repetitive pattern. And our brain emits different frequencies that can be measured with different neural type devices, right? And so these frequencies change in a very predictable way during these 5 cycles at night. Now the interesting thing is we call this stage 1, we have stage 2, stage 3, and then we have our stage 4 deep sleep. So this stage 1 we call REM. And most of us have heard of REM. It's rapid eye movement. It's when we do all of our dreaming. And it's when our muscles are paralyzed. But the interesting thing about the brainwave activity that happens during REM sleep is that it's identical or almost identical to when we're awake. It's so close to when we're awake that if you were just looking at the brainwave patterns, you couldn't tell the difference between if the person is awake or if they were asleep. The only way you know is that the person's paralyzed. Okay? So, their muscles are completely paralyzed. And that's how scientists know whether or not you're awake or you're in REM sleep. So that is REM. It's a very chaotic frequency pattern. And I'm going to explain a lot more about what's going on in your brain during REM sleep that helps cognitive health. Then we have stage 2, non-REM sleep, stage 3, so this is called N2 for non-REM 2, N3 for non-REM 3. You're going to see more pictures where they use these acronyms, so it's good to know them. And then this is N4, so non-REM 4. Yes?
When do you dream?
That all happens during REM sleep. This is good dreaming sleep, and these are non-dreaming sleep, okay? And there's different things and purposes for each of these frequencies that your brain goes through. There's a reason why your brain goes through these different frequencies. There's something happening, which we'll explain. And then this is stage 4. So I love this stage we're going to talk about, and this stage for cognitive health. But I want you to notice some unique things about this. This would be like the perfect or typical pattern of a very healthy human. And you're going to get to see mine, because I'm going to show you what I've recorded for me. And if you look, these first 2 cycles at night have stage 4, deep sleep, but none of the other cycles do. Do you see that? Only the first 2 cycles have deep sleep in them. That is super important because we're going to explain what this deep sleep does. Now, what you can also see, I'm going to point out something unique about this graph is, do you notice how the REM sleep is short right here? And it's a little bit longer, and then a little bit longer, and then a little bit longer. So deep sleep happens early, and REM sleep happens more later. And that's really important for what we're going to talk about. Okay, so here's another picture of the same thing. We're just trying to show you how REM gets bigger on each cycle, And really, in this one, this particular illustration says you might get a little in your third cycle of deep sleep, right? So the point is, it happens early in the night, and that's really important. Okay, so what are these phases of sleep, right? So, well, what they are is your brain is emitting different frequencies, like you can measure with, like I was telling you before, with something like a neural device, you can measure these. And deep sleep is really slow wave sleep. So a lot of, in the presentation you're going to see SWS, that means slow wave sleep. And that's the same thing as deep sleep, it's the same thing as delta wave sleep, they're all synonymous. They mean the same thing, they're talking about that deepest sleep, okay? All right, that we're going to learn a little bit more about. And then this one, theta, 4 hertz to 8 hertz, is where we do our dreaming. And it's also pretty slow, right? It's just, but it's erratic too. It's interesting. You're going to learn a little bit more about it. But this is a great, REM, it's a little deceiving. REM has theta in it, but it also has bits of beta and gamma. So it can be mixed up a little bit. So here we go. Now, I mentioned before, N, that all means non-REM, non-dreaming, right? And then there's REM sleep, which is when you dream, right? And so here's a little bit of things that are characteristic about each of these phases. And REM sleep right here, eye movements, you get those rapid eye movement on your eyelid, your breathing and heart rate increases, you become paralyzed, your brain activity increases, it's like almost identical to being awake. And then here, this one's the slow wave sleep, which is the delta or the deep sleep. And this is the deepest sleep state. They call it the restorative phase. And I'll explain what they mean by that. You're fully relaxed. It's when people say, oh, I woke up and I was so deeply asleep. Usually that's delta wave sleep. It almost feels like you're drugged. You're so deeply asleep.
Now, is that the N4? It was at the bottom?
Yes, that's the bottom one. Which is why I gave you all these names, because you're going to see in literature and in, if you research this on your own, SWS, you're like, what's that? Well, that's deep sleep. That's delta wave sleep. That's the lowest one, right? And they're all the same thing. It's like they use a lot of synonyms, because why use one word for something when you can use 8 that means the same thing? So that's why I'm sort of educating you a little bit about the terminology. Okay, so delta, and this is where tissue growth and cell regeneration happens, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And there's a certain amount of each of these you get each night, which is ideal. Okay, so this is a really busy slide, but it's important, okay? So deep sleep is associated with clearing the amyloid plaques from your brain. So if cognitive health and longevity is something that is a concern for you, and I think it's a concern for all of us, but especially people who might have, a hereditary predisposition for Alzheimer's or any kind of cognitive decline, you want to optimize your deep sleep. You want to maximize your deep sleep. And there's ways to do that, because that's when the cerebral spinal fluid gets pushed through your brain like a pressure washer and cleans out those plaques. So if you skip deep sleep, and I'll show you some brain patterns of elderly, you won't get your amyloid plaques cleared out, right? So you really want to maximize that. And then, it also does several things as well, and I'm going to explain it a little bit more later, but REM is associated with dreaming, and it's associated with memory consolidation. This one's associated with dreamless sleep and cleaning the plaques, but it's also associated with taking your short-term memory and transferring it to your long-term memory. That's what deep sleep does. So deep sleep cleans the amyloid plaques out, and it's a data transfer. So when I was in medical school, I went to medical school older because I was a 20-plus year mechanical design engineer and program manager, and then I decided to change careers in my 40s, and I went to medical school. So I was I don't know if I was the oldest, but one of a handful of the oldest people in my class. And I would learn all this anatomy and physiology and embryology, and I felt like my brain was going to explode. And then 2 days later, I would have to recall some information that I just learned, and I would forget. And all my classmates would remember it. I'm like, what the heck? Why am I having trouble recalling? And sometimes I felt like I had to learn it 4 times just to be able to recall it, whereas my classmates would only learn it once. They're in their 20s, you know, and they could just, so what's going on? Because I would remember it while I'm studying, and I would have my note cards, and I would get them all, but then 2 days later, I'll pick up my note cards, and I wouldn't be able to recall it. So my short-term memory was fine. I could do it in short-term, but I was having trouble transferring the memory to my long-term, so 2 weeks later, I could recall it on the exam. So I started studying sleep a lot, trying to understand how to help this memory consolidation issue. And it turns out that when you learn something new, playing the piano, driving a car, medical school in your 40s, whatever, all that memory, all that stuff you're learning is put into the hippocampus, and that's your short-term memory. And then at the end of the day, you go to sleep. You got to transfer it and clear up that little short-term buffer, so that way you can have new information come in the next day, right? And every day you got to do that. And the only way that transfer from short-term to long-term memory happens is with deep sleep. So if you skip that deep sleep, then you're not getting the transfer. So then the next day you learn new information, and it overwrites all the stuff you learned the day before, and you lose it because it wasn't able to transfer over. Okay, so that's why it's important, and I can explain from a frequency perspective why this happens. So I want you to imagine in your head that deep, slow wave sleep. It creates this almost like resonance. That's how it's described in the medical literature. It's like a hum, and that low hum that your brain's sort of emitting is like a cord plugging in from your hippocampus to your neocortex. It's like a cord. And then once in a while, if they measure your brain waves, you'll get what's called a spindle. And it's like, it sounds like a little, right? And it interrupts the slow wave. That's the data transfer, right? And so that's the transfer of the data. So the slow wave creates a resonance between the primitive brain and the newer brain, which is your hippocampus and then your neocortex. It creates a connection, right, between the two brains, and then the spindles transfer the data. And that only happens in deep sleep. Okay? Yes?
That's extremely low frequency you're
Yes.
describing, like
Yes.
4
Yes.
hertz.
Yeah, very low. And
Very
it sounds, apparently, according to scientists, it sounds like a hum, like it's very interesting. So it's very relaxing. It's a profoundly relaxing state. So, and we can do stuff to entrain our brain, meaning our brain wants to resonate. It tends to have a natural tendency to want to resonate with the frequency of an external stimuli, which is good for us. So we're gonna learn a lot today if you guys can put up with me. Okay, so transferring memories from short-term to long-term. So slow wave sleep, you send out the cord, the spindles start transferring the information over, right? And then something else happens. So now the data transfer is complete. Now you have REM, and something totally different happens in REM sleep. Okay? Yes?
Can you do all those things by inducing sleep?
Brainwave entrainment, that's what I just mentioned.
So you can do it.
You can entrain your brain using external stimuli to persuade it to go into a delta wave sleep more easily, right? But we're gonna get to the tools and techniques. Right now we're still talking about the different phases. So let me see here, what's my next slide? Okay, so I wanna talk a little bit more about this. So maybe you can move the camera towards me, but I wanna draw something on the board to make it really clear in all of your minds what's happening. So we have the slow wave sleep. Uh-oh, is this not gonna work? Let me try it out with another pen. I didn't test the pens, so we might be out of luck. All right, slow wave sleep, which is also deep sleep, right? So that sends a cord out from the hippocampus, right, to your neocortex, right? And that's just the connection. Then you have the spindles, which are like, and that transfers the data to your neocortex, okay? So now it's in the neocortex, something else happens. Now we have REM sleep, something totally different's going on. So I'm gonna describe to you what's happening during REM sleep. Well, that's not looking very good, is it? All right, well, okay, so we have in our brain associations. We have a lot, that's how our brain stores information, is by association. So like, if I say the word red, what do you think of?
Apple.
Apple. Okay, so we've got a red, and then we've got apple right here. And like What do you think of when you say apple?
Applebee's, it's a doctor way, I think doctor.
You think doctor, okay, doctor. So